Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The husband decided to go with his wife to the carnival in secret, in the aftermath of which he. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy it! Summer was coming to an end. There was just under a month left to enjoy the wonderful warm weather. Lucy and I had planned to go on vacation this year. We even sent the kids to camp so we wouldn't have to worry about them being home alone. But I still couldn't decide on a suitable destination for us to visit. Lucy had already listed numerous options for me, and she even visited a few travel agencies and collected brochures. Almost every evening for the past 2 weeks, she suggested various options to me, emphasizing a few of them where we could relax on the beach and party. However, we had been to such places for several years in a row, and I was getting a bit tired of it. It was always the same thing. For some reason, I wanted something new, something different, maybe even visit places known for their historical value, or just wander through the Amazon jungle, or venture into the depths of Africa to see rare animals and reserves. "What are you thinking about?" my colleague and friend Paul asked as he noticed I was lost in deep thought instead of working. "Oh, just thinking. I can't seem to figure out where my wife and I should go for vacation this year. You know, I'm looking for something new, new experiences, maybe even some adventure. Do you have anything in mind yet?" "Not yet. But..." I opened a webpage featuring the breathtaking trails of the Amazon, where a guide could lead you to some of the most beautiful natural spots. "I'd like something along these lines, but I haven't made up my mind for sure." "What's so interesting about that? Getting ticks and feeding mosquitoes? I don't even know what you find charming about that. If I were you, I'd just stay home and not go anywhere, lounging on the couch with the TV, beer, and chips, without anyone bothering me." "Oh, you're just lazy in that sense. Vacation should be about creating pleasant memories, even if it requires some physical effort. You can lie on the couch on a regular weekend. And to be honest, I think that would be a bit boring." "Well, suit yourself. I'm just stating my opinion. What does your wife Lucy prefer?" "She just wants to sunbathe. But honestly, I'm tired of all these beaches. As I said, I'm looking for some excitement." While we were talking, our boss appeared in the room. Knowing how strict he was about not slacking off at work, I quickly closed the website and opened a spreadsheet with data, pretending to be fully immersed in my work. Paul promptly returned to his workstation, and I focused on my monitor. Occasionally glancing at each other, we waited until the boss disappeared into his office, then discussed a few more options for my vacation. I have to say, my colleague's advice wasn't very helpful, but I wasn't discouraged. There was still plenty of time, and I was sure I'd find the perfect option. Returning home in the evening, I noticed my wife engrossed in her usual activity, sitting with her laptop and scrolling through new social media posts. There was a pleasant music playing softly in the room, and the atmosphere was filled with the aroma of a homemade meat roll. "It smells so delicious, like a roll. Did you decide to treat me a little?" I asked, stepping closer to her. "Well, not exactly a treat. I just felt like..." "And you're home early today," she observed. "Yeah, I finished my work early, and they let me go. Plus, there were no traffic jams." "What's interesting that you're looking at?" "Oh, nothing special. Just browsing." She closed her laptop and turned her full attention to me. "I called the camp today." "Oh, really? How are the boys doing there?" "Just wanted to check on how our boys are doing. It seems they're having a good time. I talked to William. Steven seems to have made new friends." "That's wonderful news," I said, sitting down on the couch beside her. "You know, on my way home, I stopped by a little store. Just to pick up something for the car. But that's not the point. On the sidewalk in front of the entrance, I ran into someone. He handed me a pretty strange flyer." "In what way is it strange?" Lucy asked with interest. "Here. Take a look." I pulled the flyer out of my jacket pocket and handed it to my wife. It has an unusual design, more like an advertisement for a movie, but it's not about a movie at all. It's an invitation. "An invitation?" Lucy took the flyer and examined it closely. "Yes. It seems there's a new vacation spot that just opened up. It's in Chiapas, Mexico. I've never heard of it, but the description and pictures are impressive. What do you think? Are you suggesting we go there? But Lucy hesitated. What? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's just a house surrounded by nature. How do we even get there? And it's probably quite expensive. No, surprisingly, it's quite affordable. Think of it as mainly paying for the ticket to Mexico. Everything else is almost free. The person who gave me this said they just opened, and all the services for the first batch of vacationers are more like advertising than a way to make money. And there's a phone number below where you can get all the details. Lucy continued to study the flyer for a while, her expression becoming increasingly interested. I could tell her desire to embark on a new adventure was growing with each passing minute, and I wouldn't even have to persuade her, as I had also become intrigued by the idea, thinking it was exactly what I was looking for. Over dinner, my wife and I discussed this vacation option again, carefully weighing the pros and cons. Lucy found the low price somewhat suspicious, but her desire to explore the wilds of a neighboring country prevailed. Furthermore, the brochure described a brief vacation program that included everything from playing billiards to an extreme river walk. The next day, I hurried to work, not because I enjoyed it, but because I wanted to share my choice with my friend and ask if he had heard anything about a place called Alma de la Verdad. The previous evening, I had spent a long time searching the internet for any information but had come up empty-handed. Did you also receive this flyer? Paul asked, taking the brochure. Who gave it to you? How did you get it? He seemed somewhat surprised. Yep, some guy on the street handed it to me. He recommended this place as a good and affordable way to have unforgettable experiences. Roger, you won't believe it, but I also got this flyer just yesterday evening. I was on my way home, and this guy approached me. He handed it to me, he said, pulling out an identical flyer from his pocket and passing it to me. He said I absolutely had to visit this place with my wife. Maybe it sounds strange, but I had just left the boss's office, and he approved my request for unplanned leave. Really? It does sound strange. Did you agree so quickly? What else did he tell you? I mean, the guy who gave you the flyer? Nothing. Actually, when I turned around to ask him for more details, he seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Maybe the twilight helped him disappear so quickly, I don't know. He's a weird one. But I liked his offer, especially given the low cost, so I decided to take the chance. Why not? You're right. Lucy and I discussed it yesterday and decided to go. Let me guess. The flight is in 2 days, right? Exactly. Did you happen to eavesdrop under the boss's office? Paul raised an eyebrow. No. I just guessed. Well, maybe it's for the best. It will be more fun with friends, I replied and prepared for the workday. Although the vacation was starting in just 2 days, there was still a lot of work to do. Lucy was thrilled when she found out that Paul and his wife Grace were also going with us. During a break, Paul and I bought our tickets, trying to select seats together. We were unsure if that would be possible with only a couple of days to go, but luck was on our side, and we soon found ourselves on a plane, speculating about where we were headed and what surprises awaited us at our upcoming vacation spot. Our wives sat behind us, as we thought it would be more appropriate since they enjoyed chatting, and after a brief discussion, we decided to take a short nap. My sleep was short, but I can tell you it was some kind of sci-fi nonsense, yet it was related to the place we were heading to. It was as if we were greeted by friendly fairies, and once we settled in, we were invited to a ball on the very first evening. At that moment, a repulsive-looking goblin of impressive size emerged as one of the guests, and just as he approached us, I woke up. Hey, what's up with you? I heard Paul. You're shivering all over. Afraid of flying? What? No. Just had a strange dream. It's all fine. Did I sleep long? Not sure. I dozed off too. Woke up because you were squeezing my hand. Hey, he looked at me more closely, you even turned pale. By the way, it seems we're already in Mexico. Look out the window. I looked out, but the landscape didn't mean much to me. I rarely saw my own region from a bird's eye view, let alone recognize unfamiliar terrain. But a few minutes later, the flight attendant announced that the plane would be landing soon and asked all passengers to prepare and fasten their seatbelts. For a while, we wandered through the airport and asked local taxi drivers how to get to our destination. But most of them just shrugged, saying they had never heard of Alma de la Verdad. Even our broken Spanish was of little help. "This is ridiculous. Inviting us to a place we don't even know," Grace complained. "Did we really have to agree without knowing the way? I told you from the beginning, Paul, that this was a foolish idea." "Well, we've arrived, so what now? We can only wander around Mexican markets." "Stop it. Why are you so angry right away? If we don't find Alma, we'll choose a local resort on the spot," Paul tried to lighten the mood. "Yes, maybe we should find a hotel. We can't spend the night at the airport. Who knows how the local police will react," I suggested. "And I'm getting hungry. Anyone else feeling hungry?" Lucy supported my suggestion, but Grace still had pursed lips, upset with her husband for dragging her so far. While we walked to a kiosk to grab a snack, I remembered that the brochure had a phone number to call for more information. I shared my idea with my friends, and they agreed, with Grace grumbling about why I hadn't done it sooner. I took out the flyer and looked for the number. It was a Mexican number, although I had initially thought it was an American operator. Nevertheless, I dialed the digits, and someone answered after a while. The man on the other end of the line greeted me with a husky voice, asked where we were and explained that we should wait a bit because a car was coming to pick us up. What a service! "Hey, do you think they're going to harvest our organs?" Grace continued to express her displeasure. But Lucy, Paul, and I actually liked the twist of events and felt a sense of intrigue. For a while longer we were waiting for transportation. Then an ordinary car pulled up behind us, and the driver spoke fluent English. We crammed our suitcases into the trunk and settled down in the cabin. For a moment, remembering all the previous mystery, I even assumed that we would all be blindfolded for the duration of the trip, to make our journey even more mysterious. But that didn't happen. And we were quite able to admire the wonderful view that accompanied us all the way. For about an hour, we made our way through the vast natural landscapes, and when we finally arrived, I noticed that we weren't the first guests here. Even from the parking area, we could see a small square with 3 couples of vacationers sitting at benches with tables. A bit farther away, we could make out the central building, followed by several bungalows for visitors. "Well, this place looks quite cozy," Grace said when we got out of the car and looked around. "Yes, it seems like we'll be able to relax very well here," I confirmed. "What do you think, Lucy? Do you like it? Is there a beach here by any chance?" She seemed to be thinking of only one thing. "Yes, there's a beach here, and it will be only for our resort guests," the driver replied while helping us retrieve our suitcases. Lucy smiled widely, and I was glad that this might be one of our most wonderful vacations ever. We went to the hall, where we were quickly checked in, and then a clerk led us to our bungalows, which were right next to each other. We also noticed a few tables outside under large umbrellas. Paul gave his opinion that it wasn't far to the bar from the bed. And each of us noticed that there was everything for a pleasant pastime, including everyone's tastes. After leaving our suitcases in our rooms, we decided to take a walk and explore the sights to get a closer look at the place. Our wives were frequently taking selfies or asking us to take pictures of them against the backdrop of the attractions. The only downside here was the lack of internet, and our wives were upset that they couldn't immediately upload their photos to their social media accounts. What's there to worry about? Look at how beautiful it is here. We came here for this, right? I told Lucy. Didn't you have enough time to spend on the internet at home? True that, Paul agreed. Well, it seems we've explored the place a bit. Shall we head back and celebrate our arrival in this piece of wild nature? I supported Paul's suggestion, and we headed back to our rooms. Upon returning, we noticed envelopes on the bedside tables in each of the rooms, and inside were invitations to a dinner in celebration of the resort's opening. Masquerade masks were also included. Cool, we're invited to a ball, I exclaimed, recalling my dream on the plane. What? Lucy approached and looked at the invitation. I say we're invited to dinner. Looks like everyone's coming. It's kind of weird. What's so strange about it? Oh, she took a closer look at the text. How interesting. You have to wear masks. But what's it all for? Who knows? It seems they've prepared everything for us, I said, picking up one of the masks and holding it to my wife's face. Hey, it suits you. You look very mysterious. About an hour later, everyone gathered in a large hall at tables prepared for the evening. Soft music played, and shortly, a man wearing a mask took the small stage and approached the microphone. Apparently, he was the organizer of the event. He delivered a welcoming speech, and to my surprise, he mentioned that we were all somewhat acquainted with him, which was why he decided to invite us as the first guests. He also said that during our stay, we would be able to open our souls to each other, which struck me as strange, and I didn't understand what he meant. At the end of his speech, the organizer asked everyone to take off their masks, which he did himself amidst a drum roll. When he removed his mask, Lucy visibly became nervous. When I asked her what was wrong, she simply replied that we shouldn't have come here. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lucy panicked, got up, and ran out of the hall. Many of the guests noticed this. I understood that something was wrong with her, so I hurried after her to find out what was going on. I caught up with her outside, where she had stopped by a low fence and was breathing heavily. Lucy, what's going on? I approached her. What happened? Do you know this person? I just felt unwell. Maybe the climate doesn't suit me. Or maybe I'm just tired from the journey. I don't know. I just want to leave here. But a moment ago, you said we shouldn't have come here. Why? I don't understand you. Please, tell me what's going on. Roger, don't ask me anything right now. Let's just leave. I'm begging you. My wife's behavior seemed very strange to me. I assumed she had recognized this person and became nervous because of him. But who was he, and why did he have such an effect on Lucy? His face seemed familiar to me too, but I couldn't remember where I might have seen him. Trying to calm her down at least a little, I granted her request, and we returned to our bungalow. There, she started rummaging through her purse in search of a sedative. I didn't even know she was taking them. How long have you been taking these pills? I asked as I held the bottle and looked at the label. Not often, just occasionally. It's just a sedative. Why? You tell me what? You rushed out of there as if you were scalded without any explanation. You asked me to leave. Well, we're here now. Can you explain to me what's going on? I stared at her with a reproachful look. Lucy felt awkward, but she was still trying to find stupid excuses for her behavior, which still didn't give me clear answers. So I decided to find out what was wrong in a different way. I left my wife in the bungalow and returned to the hall, where the guests had already moved on to drinks and appetizers during our absence, and some couples were even seated in the middle of the hall and swayed in a dance to the slow music. When I entered, I was greeted almost immediately by Paul. Hey, where did you guys go? I saw Lucy rush out. I wanted to catch up with you, but when I went out, I couldn't see either of you anymore. What happened? Don't ask. I don't understand myself. She's mumbling something incoherent. Listen, Paul. Do you know that guy? What's his story? I think Lucy got agitated because of him. I can't say for sure. But his face is definitely familiar. What do you think? Paul asked and took a glass from a tray from a waiter who was passing by us. I didn't think long and took a drink too. Who knows? What about Grace? Does she know anything? I can only come up with crazy theories at the moment, I said. We can ask her. She was just here. Paul looked around, realizing he had lost sight of his wife. She must have gone to look for something interesting. Then let's go look for her, I suggested. Paul agreed, and we headed deeper into the hall. Passing by some people, I overheard, out of the corner of my ear, that one of the guests was a doctor, and another used to be a police officer. However, at that moment, these details didn't seem to matter to me. I just wanted to find out who the man was that had caused Lucy to react so strongly. And the man himself was nowhere to be seen. We found Grace near a large aquarium. She was standing with a glass in her hand, watching the various fish swim in the water, occasionally hiding behind the seaweed. "Grace, where did you disappear to?" Paul asked, approaching her and placing his hand on her waist. "Me? Why do you say that? I'm just admiring everything here. It's amazing, right?" Grace replied. "Grace, I'm not actually looking for you for this," I interjected. "I have a few questions for you." "Oh? What kind of questions?" Grace asked. "Tell me, do you know the man who invited us all here? Have you seen him before?" I inquired. "Me?" she blushed. "Why should I know him? No, I've never seen him before. What happened?" She turned her attention back to the fish. "I don't even know, but things are starting to seem strange to me here," I began. "And you seem to have changed your mind about our trip. What made you change your perspective?" "Nothing really. I just wanted to relax. Yes, at first, everything seemed unclear to me, but now I see that it's not as bad as I thought. I even like it here." "Where's Lucy?" Grace finally noticed that my wife was not with us. "Where did you take her?" "She's not feeling well." "Do you really not know this guy?" I continued my interrogation. "No, I already told you." "Why are you so fixated on him?" "Just relax and have fun. Paul, let's go over there. It looks like there's something interesting for you." Grace pointed towards a display with photos and brochures describing the local attractions. I realized that I wouldn't learn anything from her, so I decided to find him myself and ask him a couple of specific questions. I wandered around the hall and even outside, sometimes asking visitors if anyone had seen this mysterious man. But everyone answered in the negative. Only one told me his name was Frank, and by the end I was beginning to give up hope of finding him that evening. Paul and Grace had also gone somewhere private, and I decided to just enjoy the evening, somewhere deep inside hoping that this guy would show up again. But I didn't see him again that night. I did not stay long at the party, and later returned to our bungalow to check on my wife, and I wanted to lie down and rest. When I arrived, she was sitting on the terrace in a wide armchair, looking out into the distance. "Hey, what's on your mind?" I approached her and sat down beside her. "I'm just sitting outside, enjoying the fresh air. What about you? Where were you? Having fun? What else was I supposed to do? You decided to get out of there. Are you okay? Have you calmed down?" "I feel better now." "Roger, listen, I'm sorry. I don't even know what came over me. Lucy began to apologize. It's okay," I said and brushed her stray strand of hair away from her face. "Don't worry. I understand, you were tired. I just found it strange that you felt unwell precisely when that man revealed his face. But I believe you. Come here." I opened my arms wide so Lucy could rest her head on my chest. "There, it's all good. Let's just sit here for a while and then go to rest." Lucy embraced me, and we enjoyed the sunset for a while. When the sun had completely disappeared below the horizon, we returned to our bungalow, where we lay together on the bed, indulging in relaxation after a full day. We had a few days ahead of us, during which we had the opportunity to try everything on offer here. First we visited the beach, and then Paul suggested we walk through the forest paths and feel the spirit of the wilderness. The guide who accompanied our group told us in detail about all the places we passed. He described almost every rock, telling us that this or that one in ancient times served as some important elements for the ancient people. In the evening, another announcement invited us to return to the hall we had visited the previous night. Lucy decided to stay in the bungalow, saying the daytime walk had tired her out. I, on the other hand, ventured out, thinking that I might get another chance to see the mysterious man. However, that evening, I still couldn't find him. In fact, there were fewer people in the hall this time, as most of the guests had decided to spend their evening differently. I found a spot at the bar and enjoyed tasting the local alcoholic beverages. A couple of other men, like me, were spending their evening at the bar. I glanced away occasionally when I was tired of staring into the shot glass or at my reflection in the mirror on the opposite wall behind the bottles. And at one of those moments, I noticed the receding silhouette of a man whose figure reminded me of Frank. I immediately left my occupation and hurried to catch up with the man. But the longer I followed him, the more he seemed to recede. Then I increased my pace and caught up with him in one of the corridors that led to the administration offices. "Hey, you! Stop," I called out to him, reaching for his shoulder. However, the man anticipated my move, and he turned around before I could touch him. I'm all ears. It was definitely the man I was looking for, his mole on his left cheekbone making it impossible to mistake him for anyone else. "Are you Frank? Is that correct?" I asked. "Yes." "Can I help you with something?" he replied. "Yes. I need to talk to you. What is all of this about, and how are you connected to my wife?" I looked him straight in his black, like darkness eyes, and his stare made me feel a little creepy, but I wasn't going to back down. I needed answers. "I have no idea who your wife is, sir." "How did you come to think I have any connection with her?" he replied, seemingly looking down on me, even though he was no taller. "My wife's name is Lucy. I'm sure she recognized you. When she saw you, she felt unwell immediately. Yesterday, you said that we were all familiar with you, but I'm seeing you for the first time. So, please be so kind as to explain what the hell is going on here." I do remember what I said. But, I repeat, I have no idea who your wife is. And... What? Don't understand my question? I grabbed the man by his collar and pressed him against the wall, not giving him a chance to escape. But Frank didn't seem the least bit frightened by my aggression. He kept looking at me, and his expression didn't change. On the contrary, he seemed to be mocking me. I pressed him even harder and repeated my question. And then I felt someone behind me. Frank looked in the direction behind me. I turned and saw two amassed men ready to step up to defend the idiot, massive pistols sticking out of their belts. The coward must have been afraid to walk unguarded through the empty corridors, or else how else to explain their sudden appearance. Realizing that physically, I wouldn't stand a chance against both of them, I let go of Frank and stepped back. "I'm not finished with you. You will answer all my questions," I warned him, pointing my finger. Then I turned to leave. The thugs let me pass after their chief nodded to them. But I didn't relax as I walked past them, because they could grab me at any second. I returned to the hall, however, and the three of them seemed to have vanished when I turned around. I went out into the street, and as I walked back to my bungalow, I wondered how I could catch the idiot and talk to him alone, for he was the only one who could explain everything to me. But so far the circumstances were working against me. And my wife was acting strange and suspicious. I entered our room and noticed that she was lying on the bed. Her cell phone was lying beside her, and she was lying with her eyes closed. I walked closer and sat down on the bed next to her. Lucy sensed my presence and opened her eyes and looked in my direction. "Oh, had a good time? Did you enjoy yourself?" "Lucy, I don't understand your sarcasm. You said yourself you don't want to go anywhere. I mean, really. I don't understand your behavior. When we got here, everything was fine, really fine. But as soon as you saw that guy, everything changed. You hardly even smile. Damn it, can you explain to me what's going on with you? Why are you attacking me like this?" She sat up and rested on the edge of the bed. "You're constantly trying to make me feel guilty, but I haven't done anything wrong. I told you already." "What? That you're tired? And why should I believe you? Okay, maybe after the flight, but now you haven't done anything but lounge on the bed all evening. And you keep avoiding meeting this Frank. Who is he to you? What connects you to him?" I hadn't noticed how my calm tone turned into a shout, and in that moment, I was even ready to pounce on her just to get some answers and the truth. Noticing my wife looking at me fearfully but reproachfully, I realized I was starting to get fierce and tried to pull myself together. "Lucy, just tell me everything as it is." "I can see that you know him," I said, trying to keep a more composed tone. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and then the door swung open, revealing Paul holding a small envelope. He informed us that something was about to happen in the main hall, and everyone, without exception, was invited. He handed me the envelope, which was addressed to our bungalow. When I asked what was going on, he replied that he had no idea and was quite eager to experience the surprise from the organizer. There was no dress code mentioned in the envelope, so Lucy and I went as we were at that moment. She didn't want to go, but with Paul's persuasion, we managed to convince her. When Grace joined us, the four of us headed to the party. When we arrived, we were asked to go to the next windowless hall, which had been closed until then, and told that the main surprise would be waiting for us there. No one even guessed about the future events, but everyone obediently, like a flock of sheep, followed the attendant. The hall was illuminated by neon beams, and the atmosphere gave an opportunity to relax. There were tables with drinks to one side and a small stage at the other end. Once everyone was inside, the front door slammed shut and Frank's voice came from the speakers, inviting guests to have a drink and enjoy the evening ahead. A minute later the stage curtain opened and the lead singer came out, followed by the rest of the band with their guitars and other instruments. Paul marveled at the nice gift and went straight to the drinks, inviting us to follow. While the lead singer was singing, I had the feeling that the whole thing was suspiciously generous and as if it was specially designed to gather us all here. As the song ended, Frank's voice came again. So, dear guests, as I mentioned before, you all know me. But you didn't recognize me when I first walked in front of you. You've seen me even before I had plastic surgery. I had to undergo surgery after I was thrown into a burning car from a cliff. Now, I'm going to reveal my real name to you. Stuart Miles. The audience showed noticeable agitation at his words. Yes, I see by your reactions that you know this name, and many of you are surprised that I'm still alive. But among you is one person, Lucy Brock, who can confirm that it's really me. And now, I want you to feel what I felt once. Lucy panicked, not knowing how to act in this moment, which she had seemingly been afraid of all this time. The entire setting and Frank's final words made me understand that this wasn't the end, and her troubles were just beginning. And my premonition didn't let me down. A few minutes after Frank finished his speech, the room began to slowly fill with a mysterious fog. Initially, it might have seemed like a prearranged special effect. However, the unpleasant odor accompanying it suggested that this fog was, in fact, some kind of gas. I wasn't the only one to realize this when some of the guests started choking. Paul and I, along with a few others, tried to make our way to the exit, but the door was locked from the outside, and our attempts to break it down were futile. What the hell is going on here? Paul yelled, coughing. But no one had the answer, and it was evident from their terrified faces that each guest was somehow connected to what had happened to Frank in the past. I wanted to interrogate my wife to get some explanations since Frank had mentioned her name. However, our first priority was to save our lives, and our chances were diminishing with each passing moment. Gas wasn't the only threat. Soon, a fire started in one corner, spreading rapidly through the curtains and attempting to engulf the entire room. I glanced toward the stage and noticed that there was no sign of the musicians, which meant there must be an exit. After telling Paul about it, we grabbed our wives' hands and headed that way. And yes, there was a door behind the curtain. But unfortunately, it was also locked. However, my friend's will to survive was stronger, and he threw himself at the door trying to break it down. A few more men followed us and joined him, along with me. After many efforts, we managed to squeeze the lock out of the door riser. But by the time we were free, many of the guests were trapped in the fire, and I could hear their screams as I pushed the door open with my shoulder. At one point I even noticed that two of them were already starting to burn alive. Lucy didn't manage to stay safe at this time either. One of the burning ones leaned on her and burned part of her face. I of course quickly ran to her and threw my jacket over her so that the fire wouldn't burn her anymore and pulled her closer to us. And then we tumbled out of the burning room and into the street, all charred with soot and coughing, gulping for fresh air. What the hell was that? Did they decide to barbecue us? Paul shouted. I wanted to ask my wife again, but then I saw through the bushes that Frank and a few others were heading toward the parking lot. I realized that if they left at that moment, I would never be able to find them again. Leaving everyone behind, I asked Paul to come with me, and on the way I told him the gist of my plan. He followed my instructions faithfully, and very soon, jumping over small fences and bushes, we were near the parking lot, a little ahead of those we were pursuing. I really hoped that our luck would turn around again, and we could come out victorious in this situation. Not far away, one of the guards was waiting for the others. I quietly approached him from behind and launched a surprise attack, swiftly grabbing his neck to prevent him from making any noise. As he lost consciousness, I laid him on the ground and took his weapon. "Holy shit, where did you learn that?" Paul asked quietly. "I served in the army," I replied in a hushed tone. "Let's go, we need to find the others." Paul pointed to the guard's gun, asking, "Is there something for me?" I rummaged under the guard's jacket and found another pistol, which I handed to Paul. "Can you shoot?" I asked. "I went to the shooting range a couple times." Paul replied. "Have you ever shot a person?" I wanted to be sure he wouldn't hesitate when it mattered most. Paul nodded, signaling that there would be no problem, and we went down to the cars, hiding behind one of them. And soon the idiots who were going to fry us came up. I ducked out of hiding and started shooting at the guards. I managed to take out a couple of them at once. But when they returned fire, I had to go back to my position. "Make sure you don't kill Frank. We need him alive," I told Paul, and prepared for another round. In the ensuing shootout, which now involved Paul, 2 of the villains were killed, and 3 were wounded, giving us some advantage. I dashed out of cover and headed for the car that Frank was attempting to get into. With a single leap, I tackled him, bringing him down to the ground. "Who are you?" I spoke as I turned him around to face me and punched him in the face. At that moment, I'd forgotten that 3 of his men were still alive and could put a bullet in me at any moment. But Paul was there in time, pointing his gun at them, warning them that he would not hesitate to finish them off on the spot. When my anger subsided a bit, I ceased the beating and allowed Frank to explain himself. But he only smirked maliciously, as if he enjoyed what I was doing to him. I retrieved my gun and pressed it against his temple, ready to fire. Paul called out to me. "Roger, wait. We're not going to get anything out of him. We should tie them up and call the police. Maybe they'll talk by then. And if they don't talk to us, the police will. Besides, if this man is American, he should be turned over to our authorities. And I trust ours. And I believe they'll beat the shit out of him." Paul's words convinced me a little, and I decided to heed his advice. We tied up the 3 bandits with what we had and locked them in the trunks of the cars just in case. Frank, on the other hand, was tied up tight before we locked him up. Returning to the scene, we noticed from a distance that the building was almost completely engulfed in flames. We saw people a little farther away, some waddling back to their bungalow, some who were more injured were sitting on the floor, and others were helping them. Our wives were sitting on the sidelines, and Lucy was trembling with fear as one of the men loomed over her and yelled at her, trying to get answers out of her, as everyone clearly heard her name called by Frank. I went over to him and grabbed his arm. "Hey, calm down. We've all been through a lot," I said to him. "What?" "Let this damn bro answer who that idiot was trying to burn us alive. She's the only Lucy here, right?" "Right." "Let her explain." "Back off, man," I told him. "I'm her husband. I'll handle this." "And who are you, anyway?" The man fell silent for a few seconds, realizing that he would also have to contribute something from his side and that Lucy wasn't the only one keeping a secret, given the look in his eyes. "Okay. I'll tell you everything. But not to him." "Let him go," sobbing, Lucy told me. "Lucy, have you lost your mind?" Grace interjected. "Sorry, Grace. But I can't keep quiet anymore," Lucy said. "See how close it came to disaster." I asked the man who had attacked Lucy to leave us alone, promising that I would find out what was going on. The man reluctantly stepped aside, but his eyes kept looking in our direction. "Speak." I turned to my wife. "I take it you can give a reasonable explanation as to why Frank decided to burn us all." "Stuart," she whispered faintly. "What?" I didn't understand. "His name is Stuart. What the does it matter now? Tell me." Grace sat there in horror, looking at us. Paul stared at her, unable to believe that his wife knew something too. He was completely bewildered and eager to find out the truth. It was last summer when Grace and I and some other girlfriends went out for a bachelorette party. We went to a club. We had a few drinks. And then, as Grace and I sat down at the bar to have another drink, a young man came up to us and suggested that we try something special that would make our fun more effective. We were already drunk at the time and didn't quite realize how unwise and dangerous it could be. But we agreed. He gave us each some pills. At that moment, Grace jumped up and ran off somewhere, consumed by shame. Paul initially wanted to follow her but decided to stay and hear the rest of the story. Anyway, Lucy continued, we really started feeling great. We continued drinking, then danced, and ended up in his car. Yes, I'm sorry, Roger. I'm so guilty. I didn't realize what I was doing. But I realized from her words that she hadn't just relaxed and taken pills from a man she didn't know, but had made love to him in his dirty car that night, and not just alone, but with Grace. Oh God. I wanted to tear her apart, but I also wanted to know what happened next. This Frank, or whatever his name was. Stuart, he couldn't have done this to us just because he pilled the girls and slept with them. You're such a slut, I muttered. What happened next? I'm interested in the motive. At some point I came to my senses and wanted to leave and take Grace with me. But Stuart was so into us that he wouldn't let go. I even tried to fight him, but we were very drunk and he was much stronger than we were. I had my keys in my hand. I grabbed them and shoved them down his throat. Lucy cried again, realizing that her life would never be the same again, and that I was unlikely to forgive her for her transgression. He leaned back in the seat, and it seemed as if he was no longer breathing. Grace and I were very frightened. I panicked and wanted to run away, but Grace stopped me and said that was how they would find us and put us away for murder. Then she offered me something worse. She got behind the wheel and asked me to follow her in her car. We drove out of town and we stopped at a cliff. Then she got out of the car and called out to me. She said we had to get rid of the body if we didn't want to go to jail. I was so scared at the time that I agreed with her. She threw a match into the passenger compartment and we started pushing the car. We managed to push it until it was completely on fire. And then we came back. I stood there, shocked by what I had just heard, and Paul was even more shocked. Now I understood the essence of what had happened and why Stuart had decided to deal with us. But I still didn't understand what the other people had to do with it, and why our wives, Grace and Lucy, were the ones who committed the murder. It was only later that I found out that all the invitees had something to do with it. For example, the ex-cop who'd quickly dropped the case because he was a couple weeks away from retirement and didn't want to be bothered. The doctor Stuart went to, who miraculously survived the accident by waking up in time to get out of the car, made no effort to fully restore his condition. Stuart didn't tell him the real cause of the accident and paid him to keep quiet. But when he saw the result of the doctor's work, he was very dissatisfied. There was also a former colleague of his who was also a frequent troublemaker at work, and many others who had harmed Stuart in some way. Each of the perpetrators was invited with their companions, but the invitations were not placed in their hands, but in the hands of their loved ones. Why? I don't know. Stuart was actually a wealthy man who had inherited a huge fortune from his parents. After the accident, he decided to take revenge on the culprits and, at the same time, involve other people who had caused him trouble in the past. During that time, he built a resort and had plastic surgery while the construction was underway. When everything was ready, he decided to put his plan into action. But why did he say that you recognized him and could confirm his identity? I asked my wife, stepping back from the shock a little. A few months later, when I was at the ATM one evening, a man approached me, Lucy began. At first, I thought he was a robber, and I was ready to give him all the money I had. But he said he didn't come for that and asked if I remembered the guy I killed. I turned around, but it was a completely different person in front of me, although his voice was very similar. He told me that it wouldn't be our last encounter, and I would pay for what I did. But after that incident, I didn't see him again, until now. Lucy cried again. You're an idiot, Paul jumped on her. And you kept silent? You could have gone to the police, told them everything. So many people suffered because of you. Paul, stop. I tried to pull him away from the frightened Lucy. She's been through enough. I'm angry at her too for what she did, but... What? Paul turned to me. You're still defending her? She. And Grace. Oh God. Paul lost it and, leaving us behind, walked away. I stayed and sat down next to Lucy. I didn't know what to do with her at that moment. We sat in silence for a few minutes, only she was crying quietly. Then sirens were heard. Apparently the fire was visible from afar, and some of the residents called the appropriate services. Together with the firefighters, the police arrived. The firemen had little work to do by the time they arrived, as the building was almost all burnt out and there was only a pile of embers in its place. I spoke to the police and told them that we had all been victims of some maniac, and pointed out the cars in which the miscreants still lay curled up. Stewart, as Paul had said, had been turned over to law enforcement in the States, and the rest of us were local gangsters that Stewart had hired and were being tried on the spot. Lucy, Paul, Grace, and I went home. Paul had separated from his wife, believing her to be a traitor and a murderer. I struggled to persuade him not to turn her and Lucy into the police. After all, they were our wives, albeit stupid wives who had committed a crime, but they were just fighting for their lives and freedom. I, on the other hand, was left to live with my wife. I realized that the cruel truth had forever wounded my heart and soul, and I would never be able to trust her again. But I decided to do it only for the sake of my children, and it was hard for her to live with this burden and now with a disfigured face. It took me a long time to recover from what had happened. Paul listened to me and didn't report the crime to the police. And that sick idiot was sent to prison for life for attempted premeditated murder of a large number of people. By the way, it was a very high-profile case that was reported in all the media. And you know, when his picture started circulating, it turned out that this idiot was constantly slipping pills to beautiful women in clubs and then raping them. There were a lot of police reports. And he had already been convicted of attempted mass murder and was constantly being brought in for questioning on new criminal cases. His rich parents tried to get him off at first. But when they found out the whole truth, they simply disowned him, sold all their property and business, and left the country. By the way, when there was a case of mass rape of women victims, my wife and my friend's wife were summoned for questioning. I hired a lawyer for them and he was able to prove that it was self-defense. After all, it turned out that he was a real maniac. There were a lot of post-aged women he abused and cut them with a knife, leaving scars. In time I had plastic surgery for my wife, as her face had been badly damaged in the fire. Anyway, I was about to end this story, but I still wanted to share the latest news. Paul, after divorcing Grace, quit his job and moved to another state. I didn't really understand what he was doing. It wasn't a deliberate affair. Who knows how any of us would have behaved under the influence of psychotropic pills. I am in no way excusing his wife or mine. You should always control yourself, especially when drinking in a club and getting to know strangers. But, as they say, let he who is without sin cast the first stone at me. Thank you for listening to my story. What do you think of our story today? I thought the story was interesting, especially the way the man revealed his identity to his wife. It was a moment that made me jubilant. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.